Well, this person asked, um, let's see, well, where does it start? She says she was responding to the quick tip we did on the various color wheels. And she said they remind me a bit of Richard Schmid's color chart exercises in Alla Prima. That's his book. I know he was not trying to come up with a new system like Munsell, but I wondered if you might do, at some point, do a quick tip on the benefit of creating color charts the way he did. And then she goes on with other comments, and she says, is it possible to really stick with a fixed palette anyway? Two important color questions. Well, in the first part of this person's question, she was mentioning Richard Schmid's Alla Prima. If you don't have this one, well, on my book recommendations tip, of course, you know this one is one I referred to. It is an absolute handbook for the painter. But the color charts she was talking about are right here, begin right here. Now, the Richard Schmid's color charts are his way of discovering what potential his palette of colors will give him so that he can use those as a way of keeping color harmony. So the first chart that we see is simply all the colors he has on his palette, the colors that he uses when he's painting as majority of the time, and their various values. You can see that listed, or you can see the illustrations of that as we go down there. But then the important part of the charts has to do with each of those colors and what they do to each other. And then he takes individual colors and here's what he does. Now this is really informative for any painter. He starts out with the first color. He uses he has two yellows on his chart. He uses cadmium lemon and cadmium yellow pale. You see what he does there? He starts here with the color straight out of the tube, and then he explores from its value straight out of the tube all the way down to its lightest light, so he can get 5 different values of that color. Then he adds into it another color from his palette, and he goes down the line, which I'll show you in just a moment. So there he's adding the 2 yellows together. This yellow added into the cadmium yellow light, or cadmium yellow pale, I believe he says, and same thing. And then he goes on down, and each one of these is the next color on his palette added into this first color. So he has here the full range of what he can get, one potential for what he can get from all of the colors on his palette when mixed into that single color. Then he goes to his next color and does the same thing. And it's a very meticulous little exercise, but it's very valuable. Color charts like that are very valuable in informing you what your colors will do when mixed into each other. Now, as to the question of is it necessary to have a standard palette, it means the same thing. Here's what happens over a period of time with experience. Painters, like every other craft, and painting is a craft in addition to being an art, painters will usually have a palette of colors that they've narrowed down over a span of time that give them all the colors they need in whatever painting they're going to do. And the selection of colors, tube colors that go on that palette, will vary from painter to painter. So I will refer back to my palette now, and show you. I have tried to narrow down my palette over the years to fewest colors I can put on the palette, or the fewest colors I can use, and come up with the most possibilities, colors that I can mix and be able to interpret any subject I see. So my palette is built on the color wheel, very similar to Richard Schmid's. My selection of the colors and their arrangement just happens to parallel with his. In some cases, he influenced my selections, and I'll explain that as I go along. But you can see what I've done here is set up a palette that follows the color wheel, because all of you know what an advocate of using the color wheel I am. And so you see it starts out with yellow. Well, I have only one yellow that ranges on the yellow range. My choice is Hansa Yellow Light for various reasons. But at one time I had about 3 or 4 different yellows I used. But over the years I've discovered I really only need that one yellow when I have the other selections I've made. Now the next color on my palette is really a yellow orange. It's the Yellow Ochre Light, which is influenced by Schmid. I discovered that color through Schmid, but I've also discovered over the years I don't need it much, and I don't use it very much anymore because I'm now using complements to lower the saturation of these colors. So that one will probably go, although I do love the way I do love its being there, so I haven't taken it away yet. And then it goes on to the yellow orange, and I won't name them all. I don't want to make the quick tip too long, but you can see the yellow orange, which is right here, then goes on, and this is a red orange, which you see goes right around the wheel right here. These two are red orange. This is a dark, low saturation red orange, and this is a middle value, very high saturation of red orange. And so the hue of red orange then, that's why they appear together right there. And then it goes on to the red, and the red I use, the dark red I use is the alizarin crimson. When mixed with this one will give me the closer hue of red. And then this one is the red violet, and I go on, you see violet here, and then blue, I use the ultramarine blue, and there's another place where I've narrowed it down. Over the years, at one point I had ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, and phthalo blue, all 3 on my palette. But I discovered that when I have these other selections, I don't need cobalt blue and I don't need phthalo blue, because I can mix the colors that those yield by using other combinations. And so I just use the ultramarine blue now. And then this is the Rembrandt Viridian. That's a blue-green or greenish blue-green. And it's a very transparent color, and I found that when I mix it into ultramarine blue, that gives me what I used to use phthalo blue for, and so on. And then the other color that is on my palette now, but I don't use anymore, is sap green. The reason I don't use this one anymore is I discovered that I can use Rembrandt Viridian, and this Rembrandt's transparent oxide red, and it will give me the exact same mixture that I get in the sap green that I was using. So now my palette really consists of all of these minus this one and this one. Now these colors on my palette give me every single color I need for any painting I do. And the only exception of that is if I'm working with flowers that go more towards those pinks that we see. Sometimes I have to go for a quinacridone pink, or something that leans a little bit more into the higher intensity, but I very rarely need that. I do have other tube colors that sometimes I will use just for the fun of it sometimes, or sometimes I need like a transparent dark yellow and I'll use the Indian yellow, that sort of thing. But those times are rare. So to answer that question, yes indeed, it is possible to have a single palette of colors that where you don't need dozens and dozens of tubes, but it's a matter of narrowing that down and to colors that you experience will give you all the color mixtures that you need. Now I want to go through very briefly here 2 systems for studying what those colors will do to each other. The first is I want to show you how the Schmid system works, because that's the one she's referring to. And for those of you who might be interested in doing some study of your colors by using this method of Richard Schmid's color charts, to show you how that works. So it would start something like this. In this case, I'll start with the yellow because he starts with his yellow. So he starts here and goes out. And so the yellow then, in that case, the first color then that would go on in the chart, on the first row of the chart, would be the yellow straight out of the tube, like that. Put a little bit more of that. And maybe a little bit more now. Okay, now this is what Schmid is doing. Now we want to see what happens to that yellow when I add other colors on the palette to it. Now because I don't use the yellow ochre light anymore, I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to go straight to my yellow orange. Now the amount that we add to this is part of it, because we've got to remember I can add a little bit of yellow orange to this and it will make one kind of change. If I add more, it will make a different change and lean it more towards yellow orange. So the amount that goes into this is it's letting it still be in the yellow range, or strongly influenced by the yellow, but still have a change that color can make. And so then that would give me this. Now Schmid, you can, if you want to do these charts, you can simply do them with a flat brush like I'm doing now, or you can follow his instruction and have them very precise with, you know, tape between them, creating little blocks, however you choose. But then this goes on the horizontal line. This is Hansa yellow light mixed with cadmium yellow deep. That is yellow orange. So that's what that color will do now when I mix it with. Now can you see when I mix it with the cadmium yellow light into the Hansa yellow? Now can you see already? That tells me if I need that in a painting. If I'm working with yellow and I need it to move more towards yellow orange, I have that option in my painting. Alright, now I'm going to start out with fresh yellow here. We don't add back into this mixture. This mixture has served its purpose until I start to do the value line, which I'm not going to extend the tip by doing that. But now the next color on my palette is this feldspar oxide red. This is a red orange, and it's a low intensity red orange. Now I don't want it to vary, I want just to influence that yellow. I don't want to add so much into it that I change it totally. I want to still lean towards the yellow. But you see what I get there when I mix that in? That gets very close to the yellow orange. A little bit different in saturation, very close to the yellow orange. So now I know that if I need a color that is in that range and needs to be a little less saturated than this one, I know that I have that option. Alright, so that's the way the chart goes, and then we'll continue. I'm not going to do all my colors. I'm just going to show you how to begin to develop your own charts for doing this kind of study. Okay, the next one then, I'll begin again anew with another pile of yellow, because that's the color I'm working with. And this would be my yellow. I would call this my Hansa yellow light chart. So all the colors that I'll put here are showing me potential for Hansa yellow light, or other colors in here being added to Hansa yellow light. So then I'll go here now into just a little bit. Now I have to really be careful, and this is why you need to know your tinting strength. So just going just with enough of that cadmium red light, I'll just pull it in here, to influence this, to change it, but not to lose its character or its leaning towards yellow. And you see how very similar that is now to this. Do I really need that on my palette? You see, that's one way that we can narrow down our palettes. I probably don't really need it for when I need that color, but as far as using it to mix into other colors, I do need it, and that's why it hasn't gone yet. It probably won't go either, because I do use it an awful lot. But look, it's so similar. So here we go. There we go. That is the cadmium red light mixed in the Hansa yellow light. And I'll just continue that. I will do one more now to show this is just the progression. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to skip. Now you see, as I continue to add these colors that are in progressions around the wheel like this, you see how similar they are. I'm going to move now directly into, I'm going to skip alizarin crimson for the moment. You wouldn't do that if you're setting up your charts. You would just move directly into from one color as they progress on your palette to the next. But I'll just go to the red violet there, and let's go again. Fresh yellow on the palette, and a touch of red violet. Now the darker these colors get as I move around, the less it will take. I still want to keep it in that range, and I almost used too much of that. Let's get a little bit more of the yellow in. I just want to, and you see what happens there? Now we begin to see some desaturation. And now you can see why I don't need the yellow ochre light anymore, because I can mix that yellow ochre light just by adding the that is the quinacridone violet into it. And there we go, keeping it in that yellow range still. I can't emphasize that enough. Remember, I've skipped the alizarin crimson now, and now we can see how that we get that progression of what happens when I mix other colors into my yellow. And always wash the brush when you're doing these exercises so that you get a true reading. So I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to bypass the violet here and start moving into the blue. And still remember, I want to keep that in the yellow range. And so I'm going to add just a little tiny bit of ultramarine blue. Remember, it's a dark color, so I've got to control the amount. It doesn't have quite the tinting strength as the red violet did, so I don't have to hold back that much. But now we can see that the hue is beginning to go more cool. I'm getting more of a yellow-green now. That's moving into the ultramarine blue, and so we'll put that there. Be sure I just get that, not the pick up the blue with it. So here, remember I skipped, so you are not seeing the total progression, but you're getting the idea, I hope. And then I have that one more color to add to it to get that progression, and that is the blue-green. That is my Rembrandt Viridian. And so we will get an, I think no I won't. I'm going to stick right here. I want that progression. I want that horizontal line to stay like that so you can see the sequence here. So now I'm just going into the blue-green. This is the Rembrandt Viridian, as I said, and it doesn't have a very strong tinting strength, but it is darker, so I got to go real careful. Now we see here the difference in what happens to yellow, my Hansa yellow light, when I mix the blue-green into it and when I simply mixed ultramarine blue into it. So you see, I have information. That gives me information now that I might not have had if I hadn't done this before. I might not have had if I didn't do that. So I put this here. Now you can see the two together. I didn't get that quite as mixed as I really needed to. So let me get it a little bit more mixed and give that for, there we go. You can see that's a much more saturated color of yellow-green than this is, because ultramarine blue does have a little bit of violet in it, just enough to desaturate that the yellow, whereas the Rembrandt Viridian doesn't. It has only blue and a little bit of yellow in it, and it gives us that high desaturation, a higher saturation. So you can see already that progression. I would call then this the first line, the first value line, in my chart, in my Hansa yellow chart, Hansa yellow light chart. Now, if I took it on the way Schmid does, which I won't do, I don't want to extend this, then I would begin to add a little bit of white down, and I'd get the values, the values of each of those value possibilities of each of these colors all the way down. Then I would have the full chart that would show me that possibility of with Hansa yellow light and what happens to it when I can mix all these other colors into it. So then the next step, this would be one chart. I would start with a new chart, and that new chart I would start with the next color on my palette, and I would do the same thing. I would start with mix a little yellow into it, and then I would just move down the line of the alignment, the way I have my colors aligned on my chart. And that second chart then would be my cadmium yellow deep chart. So when I would finish, this does take time, over a period of time, but once you finish, you will have a chart then for each of your colors that shows you potential for possibilities when you mix any color into that single color that you studied. Now the other shortcut to this would simply memorize your colors, and if you work with them long enough, I memorize your hues as you see them on the color wheel. If you do that long enough, and you know what colors, what's in a tube color, then you will be able to shortcut that. The other side of that is if you will do these exercises where you go bit by bit, color by color, tube color by tube color, and create these charts that Schmid advocates, you will discover potential that you might not have discovered, and you also discover a way of keeping color harmony in your paintings. So you might give that a try. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.